Hi YouTube, Darth here. A few days ago, DICE detailed the latest information on the game modes that will be available at the launch of Battlefield 5. Today I'm going to talk through and summarize what they said, and there are a couple of surprises that we're waiting in the update. There's also some more familiar game modes and some things that anybody playing the alpha could have already guessed. So let's take a look at what's coming up in the future of Battlefield. First and foremost, it sounds like Grand Operations may not be available at the launch of Battlefield 5. Now, it's open to some interpretation, but here's what the DICE update said. Grand Operations is the ultimate multiplayer experience designed to seamlessly showcase the maps and modes of Battlefield 5. Each Grand Operation presents a powerful narrative experience inspired by historical events. Shortly after launch, you will be able to take part in the first Grand Operation. Now, I don't know if that was a miswording or oversight from DICE, but the implication that it will be shortly after launch rather than at launch certainly sounds like it's been pushed. I find this very strange for a number of reasons. First, Grand Operations was available to play at least partly in the Battlefield 5 alpha. I mean, it wasn't the greatest or grandest experience ever, but I was never a fan of regular operations in Battlefield 1 either. Second reason is it had sounded like Grand Operations was going to be the premier new game mode in Battlefield 1. Why wouldn't it be in at launch? So it could be a simple misunderstanding. But what if Grand Operations isn't available at launch? What happened? I certainly wouldn't object if DICE decided to hold back on Grand Operations to add a little bit of extra polish. But it seems strange their update wouldn't mention that fact. Alternatively, perhaps this was the plan all along to have each Grand Operation available for a limited time. Maybe there are specialized customizations or other content available for those that participate in these live events. Much like how Fortnite runs seasons of content, perhaps DICE is planning to do the exact same using Grand Operations as the cornerstone. Who knows? I'm into some serious speculation here. Or maybe it's just like Giant Shadow was in Battlefield 1, meant to tide players over between major content drops. Which brings me to my next thought. The phrasing behind the timeline seems intentionally vague. What is shortly after launch? In Battlefront and Battlefield 1, that meant December. Will it be that long in this case? I certainly hope not. I hope shortly means within a week or two. So speculation-wise, we'll have to see what DICE's inevitable plan will be. But it does make me wonder just how they plan on running live ops on Battlefield 5. The other two things that DICE mentioned about Grand Operations were known factors. There are two parts of Grand Operations detailed here, Airborne and Final Stand. Airborne features what is essentially a modified version of Rush from previous Battlefield titles, where players are planting explosives on objectives. This did feature in the Battlefield 5 alpha on Narvik and was probably the more fun part of Grand Operations. The other mode in the alpha played out much like regular operations in Battlefield 1. What we didn't see in the alpha was Final Stand. According to DICE, this game mode will only sometimes appear as a tiebreaker and involves both teams trying to stay alive, so there will be no respawns possible. I'm curious to see how this plays out, as it seems kind of like a turtle's paradise. Whatever team bunkers up will probably win. DICE mentioned the scarcity of resources, but didn't mention if medics will have access to revives or not, or if support will be able to throw ammo. Perhaps some of the vagueness in this mode is why Grand Operations is not dropping at launch. Maybe they just need some more time to develop, in which case that's interesting if a little surprising. No surprises here, Conquest is the core gameplay mode of Battlefield, and after a short derailment with Battlefield 1, DICE has brought classic Conquest back. No more score counting up, no more behemoths, no elite pickups, just classic Conquest. I was really pleased to see them drop the things that simply did not work in Battlefield 1 for this next game, especially with my time in the alpha. The alpha felt a lot more like the Battlefield I expect and less like a huge experiment on a franchise product. Don't get me wrong, I'm okay with experimentation, but developers should choose to let players opt into that kind of thing. Do you want to fundamentally alter Conquest? Well, make that a different style and make it available for a limited time. If people like it, they'll let you know. And if you're thinking Classic Conquest isn't classic enough, according to DICE, they'll also be bringing back Conquest Assault for certain maps. If you're not familiar, this means that once your flags are gone, you can't spawn on the map unless it's on a teammate. Probably the most fun I can remember with this recently is on Tala Market in Battlefield 3. By the way, if you're listening, DICE, please make more maps like Aftermath. Anyways, the nice thing about Conquest Assault is that if you're the team that is getting dominated, there's an easy out. If all your flags and spawns are gone, the map ends pretty fast. No need to worry about spawn camping. It's nice that they have a mix of conquest styles, as I do think there is a place for both. I know I was thinking about this yesterday about how nice it would have been if Metro had been Conquest Assault rather than having to deal with spawn camps in that nightmare map. So this is kind of an interesting concept. DICE describes Frontlines as: the tug-of-war combat of Frontlines can be described as a mix of Conquest, Rush, and Battlefield 4's Obliteration mode. In Frontlines, both teams fight for control over one flag objective at a time, unlocking the next one to push the front line towards the enemy base. Conquering the last flag opens the enemy base, and their strategic objectives become vulnerable to planted explosives, a new addition in Frontlines for Battlefield 5. Oddly enough, this sounds a lot like what Grand Operation was in the Battlefield 5 Alpha, except in reverse. Or a lot like Titan Mode or Carrier Assault from earlier Battlefields. I actually think that Rush, Obliteration, and Carrier Assault were some of the more exciting matches in Battlefield 4, at least when the map was made for them and the teams were willing to play cooperatively. So at least at face value, this sounds interesting. I've got to say that bomb plants as a way of ending a match are really exciting, so this is one game mode I'll definitely be checking out at launch. If you're not familiar with Domination, it's basically a smaller version of Conquest. Teams fight over a few flags in a confined area of the map, usually the same portion of a map used for Team Deathmatch. This was easily one of my favorite game modes in Battlefield 4, although it was rare and difficult to find a server constantly running it with a decent population. I'm pretty sure it was also in Battlefield 1, though I really didn't care for that game nearly as much. It's nice to see it making an appearance again in Battlefield 5, as I think it provides some of the strategic decision-making of Conquest, but with an infantry focus. Maybe one of the reasons I liked it a lot in Battlefield 4 was because there weren't a billion vehicles constantly spawning, unlike the bloated Conquest maps. Don't get me wrong, I like vehicle combat, but Battlefield 4 had upwards of 20 on every launch map. There's definitely a fine balance. Now, if you loved Operations in Battlefield 1, fear not, as that game mode is also coming back as Breakthrough. DICE defines it as: in Breakthrough, the map is divided into several sectors, all owned by the defending team at start of match. If you're on the attacking team, your goal is to take the sectors one by one in sequential order, which is done by controlling all the sector's available capture points. Battlefield 1 players will recognize Breakthrough from Operations, where it was the sole game mode. I think my biggest problem with Operations in Battlefield 1 is what DICE had to do to accommodate it. Since every BF1 launch map had to support Operations, they were all very linear in their setup. And because DICE frequently reuses maps or parts of maps to support different game modes, it polluted the Conquest experience pretty badly. Now, I haven't played the expansions to Battlefield 1, so I certainly hope DICE learned their lessons there. I was never a big fan of Operations in Battlefield 1 since I found it didn't appeal to people who love to flank. It seemed to be mostly geared to playing like Metro and Lockers from Battlefield 3 and 4, long slogging grinds that mostly put the enemies right in front of you. Again, I love to flank and find opportunities, so this game mode never really appealed to me personally. But I know plenty of people who both love those maps and who also loved Operations, so that's back again. Finally, DICE mentioned that they were bringing back Team Deathmatch. There's really no surprises here. Get dropped on a map and shoot enemies. For as focused as the rest of the combat modes are in Battlefield, this has always felt like a little bit of a weird outlier to me. I can't say that I've ever had an amazing game of TDM outside of Squad DM in Battlefield 3. And I think Squad DM is a lot more focused than TDM, but that's a different story. So once again it's back, and once again if you just like shooting enemies without having to think about an overall picture of the map, TDM may be more your speed. So that's all the information that DICE gave us this time around. I think there's a lot of open and unanswered questions about what form Grand Operations is going to take and when that's going to become available. I'm honestly not terribly concerned that it might not be available at launch. It was not blow my socks off amazing in the alpha and could probably use some work if that's what they're planning on doing with the extra time. If it's a simple miswording, well, that will be cleared up in the next week or so, I imagine. Or at the very least by the next alpha in late August during Gamescom. Overall, I'm still pretty excited for Battlefield 5 as I'm primarily a Conquest player and that seems like it'll be the front and center this time around, at least for the basic game. So what game modes are you most excited about in Battlefield 5? Are there any that you think are sorely missing? How do you feel about this latest news about Grand Operations? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to force choke that like button. If you're looking for some more Battlefield information and updates, check out my channel and please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time, YouTube.